Hey, good afternoon and morning, everyone. This is Mark here, and today I'm going to take you through a little bit about how to do quality inspections within Business Central, specifically through our Quality Inspector solution that's part of our suite of solutions for Business Central. So it's very configurable, very customizable, um, and we can do forms for basic quality inspections, NCRs, CARs, ECRs, whatever you want to do within that environment, with calculations and lookup fields and all sorts of things. Most of what you would need to be able to build out a fairly comprehensive, inspection related to, again, whatever record you're dealing with. Typically, it's going to be receiving or production or maybe warehouse movements, things like that you're doing it. We do have a grading capability, so in environments, chemicals, foods, things like that, where different parameters might generate a different grade of product, like a high moisture content might be a grade B product instead of a grade A product. So we have that ability as well. So instead of just having a pass-fail tolerance, you can actually have grading tolerances that allow you, as you enter the test results, to have it automatically grade that product, grade that lot number as a specific grade that you define. Oops, hit my mouse there accidentally. All right. AQL. So again, for those environments where you need to do sampling, like food or chemicals, or even discrete manufacturing, where if I, receive 10,000 O-rings, I'm not going to test every one. I'm going to test a sample of those. So we've got that sampling capability, lot skipping. So, if the first 3 lots pass, we're going to not bother testing again and for another 10 lots before we go back to testing again, those sorts of things. First article inspection, so bubble charts, things like that we can deal with. And then back up to the top where it's flexible and highly configurable, the ability to integrate with Business Central workflows and Power Automate and Teams provides a ton of flexibility. So you can really tailor whatever workflow you want to match your internal processes to work with Quality Inspector. Right. And a few other things here. So that's the basics of what's there. The bottom line is Quality Inspector allows you to generate a quality inspection document effectively, enter the test results, have it indicate a pass or fail, and then we can automate what happens if something passes or fails. All right. So the problem with that is, everybody wants to do electronic quality inspections. Nobody wants to use paper if they can avoid it. And this also applies, by the way, to asset maintenance, where with asset maintenance, everybody wants to do electronic asset maintenance, but sometimes it's very hard to get these things set up and working, right? Like you're on paper now. How do I move all of that into an electronic system? Well, one of the ways within Quality Inspector is the ability to take those paper quality documents, given that they're a reasonable format, import those. We use the Azure Document Intelligence and Copilot to grab those existing quality forms and turn them into electronic versions where it creates all the fields and everything you need within Quality Inspector to record that. And then what you can do once that test is created, if you still want to stay with that handwritten quality process in the shop or receiving or wherever you are, because it's a simpler way of managing the change. They keep using the paper for a while. They can handwrite everything in. We can scan that in, import that into Business Central, and it'll OCR, it'll pick out all the handwritten text, and it'll fill in the values automatically. We also have with Copilot the ability to do, sort of hands-free data entry as well. If you're sitting there with a pair of calipers measuring something, you can just basically talk to Business Central and it'll fill in the results as you're reading them off, so you can kind of go hands-free. So at any rate, but the paper to electronic, using that Azure Document Intelligence, that makes it very plausible to be able to continue using your paper process for the people that don't like change, but still have those, detailed electronic quality records. All right. Enough of that. Let's go in and see what this stuff all looks like. All right, so I'm going to fire up Business Central here, and I'm going to go through a little bit of the setup on this stuff first, just to show you kind of what's required. If you install this, by the way, from Marketplace, which used to be called AppSource, one of the questions when you run the setup wizard is, do you want to import the sort of sample data? If you do that, that's roughly what you're going to see set up here. I've got not much more than just the basic sample data set up. But I'm going to start with Quality Inspector setup here. And there's a whole bunch of things you can set up within here. The basics, like do you recreate tests all the time or do you use existing tests, and, all sorts of things on how the UI operates. And, you know, um, if you got a COA contact number, I'm not going to get into the details on all of these fields, but, there's a lot of configuration you can do here. What I did want to mention are a couple of things. One is on this personal device interface. I'll start at the bottom. I seem to be doing that today. This allows you, when you're using a phone device, or a scanner device, to indicate what you want to see showing up on that test. But this also works with the Teams integration. So if I'm sharing information via Teams, even to somebody that doesn't have a Business Central license, this indicates what we're going to show within Teams when I share that from within Business Central. Okay. And then there's some setup on the artificial intelligence, the AI stuff. But one of the things I wanted to cover off here, and this applies to receiving, production, and inventory, but this is how we actually create the test. So these are the defaults for how we trigger new inspections, new tests to be created. And in this case, what I've said is, okay, if we're using warehouse receipts, when I post a warehouse receipt, that's when it's going to trigger a new incoming inspection to be created, right? Or if I'm just using purchase orders, when I post the purchase order, that's when it's going to do it. But I could also create those tests when it's released. Maybe your process is, hey, I don't want to receive everything until I've done QC on it, right? There's environments like that. Somebody drives a truck in and you look at it and you say, no, take it away without receiving it. So you have those options here, and you can override these at the test level as well. So there's a few things you can set up to automatically create those tests for you just from these little settings. And there's other ways you can do it as well. Now, the same thing goes with production, right? There's a few triggers. So when do we automatically create the tests and things like that? So a whole bunch of different triggers there. How often do you want to trigger those tests? Like every 5 units, every 100 units, or every hour we want to trigger tests. Lots of things like that on the production side as well. And then finally here on the inventory, the idea behind this is, I've got product in receiving, or I've got product just sitting in the warehouse, and I can say, hey, as soon as I move that into a QC bin, I want to trigger a test automatically based on that movement from one bin to another, right? And you specify the bins. So that's another way of doing it. Hey, I get something in, I move it into the QC bin, and as soon as it's in the QC bin, it triggers an inspection for me. Okay, so lots of different ways we can automate that trigger. Now, these are the ones we sort of have default settings for: receiving, production, and sort of inventory movements, or moving inventory around in the warehouse. But again, you can trigger tests on almost anything you want within the system, either automatically or manually. So whether it's a safety log or an employee record or some custom table or whatever you like, we can trigger those tests any way you like. Now, a couple other little things that I'll talk about on this. The ability to set granular permissions, right? So we've got a bunch of employees here, also shop floor integration. So there is integration with shop floor insight and warehouse insight as well. But you can decide what people are allowed to do. So individual people are allowed to do within here. Now, the standard Business Central permissions apply as well. So you can say who's allowed to edit or view or whatever the individual records. But on this, I can say this particular person, they're not allowed to reopen a test or delete tests or any of those sorts of things, but they can create retests, that kind of stuff. So you've got a lot of granular permissions you can set sort of per quality inspector user in here. Okay. The other thing to cover off while I'm here, well, actually, I'll talk about a few things. Let's talk about that grading. I mentioned that earlier, because grading also determines what we can do with the product, right? So here I've got a few. The typical, most people are going to use, sort of pass, fail, in progress type grading, right? So a test is in progress, or it's passed, or it's failed. But we can also, again, have, grade A, B, C, and you can have different tolerances, like average humidity content or moisture content in product makes it a grade A. If it's high, it's a grade B. If it's low, it's a grade C. You can set up those tolerances on a per product basis. And then based on the grade or the state that that product is in by lot number or serial number or package number, you can go in and you can control what we're allowed to do with it. So as an example, if it's in progress, we're not allowed to ship that product. Like you can't ship it until, your test is complete, right? If it's failed, we also prevent you from shipping it. But if it's passed, you can ship it if somebody has signed off on that test and said it's finished. So tons of different things here from manufacturing, receiving, shipping, all of those sorts of things. What you can do with a serial number, lot number, package number based on what's happened with that inspection. All right. So lots of granularity there, lots of control on how you block the lot numbers or serial numbers or whatever you have. And of course, you can do the full block where you just block the lot number entirely for all transactions. That gives you a lot more granular control over how that works. A couple other things here. We're not going to get into this too much, but we do have that AQL capability, acceptable quality limits capability. These are the standard AQL settings where you would come in and define your sampling code and your lot sizes and all this. And so based on these configurations within the sampling setup, it'll determine your sample size as you're receiving product or producing product. So if I've got an inspection level of 1 and a lot size of 10,000, it's going to give me a code K, and that's going to drive my sample size. Maybe based on my planning, my sample size, I need to sample 100 of those items or whatever it happens to be. So there's all that sampling capability, sort of formal, detailed sampling capability. I'll show you in the test. You can also just go in and say, hey, I want to do 10% instead of setting up all that AQL stuff in here. While I'm here, last thing, I'll just talk about tools. I'll show you this in the test as well. But the tools, it's a way of tracking tooling that we might need or equipment we might need as we're doing inspections. So for example, I've got a torque wrench here. I've got a calibration date, all of those sorts of things. And I can create views and I can filter, I can say, hey, what's coming up for calibration in the next month or whatever. So you can use it to track calibration records and those sorts of things. Again, here's that dock extender I mentioned earlier. I can just drag and drop calibration records or purchase orders or whatever into this and track it against this particular tool. The other thing you can do is, where it says identification number required, what this means is as I'm doing the inspection, if I've set it to required there, that means I need to record the serial number for the specific tool that I use just to validate which actual tool I used when I was doing that inspection, right? And the way this is set up, we can have, generic just means I use a dummy number. I can create whatever I like. I don't need anybody else. I just list all the pieces of equipment I need for this, but I can also link it to an item or a fixed asset or a resource depending on what I want to track as far as, tooling, in air quotes, while I'm doing those inspections. All right, so that's a little bit of the setup. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here. Most of it, use the default, see how it goes, and then you can tweak it as you go. Where really the key sort of setup or the guts of this thing lie are in the test templates. So a test template, what that is it's basically an entry form that you're defining. So a test template is really defining what your data entry form is going to look like. And if you run the setup wizard, as I mentioned earlier, you'll get most of these automatically come in with that sample data, and you can mess with them and do whatever you like. This 5S inspection, I did a little differently. I think I'll show you that after. Where I created that myself, and I did that actually by importing an existing paper-based quality form to bring that in there. And this is also interesting because you'll notice it's a work center inspection. We're inspecting a work center or a fixed asset or whatever it is, whereas these other guys are all inventory-based or mostly inventory-based. So again, you can create inspections on anything you like. But let's actually jump in and look at one of these. I'm going to start with receiving because that's pretty typical, right? People are typically using receiving or production when they're using Quality Inspector. Now, on the screen here, there's a few things. You got your code and your description. This quality inspection numbers here. What that allows you to do is if you want different number series for the different types of inspections you do, maybe you want a different number series for receiving versus production versus something else, you can specify a different number series for any tests related to receiving, just for organizational purposes. And this template type in general just means, it's a standard test. But if you're doing first article inspections and things like that, you can do a balloon bubble, and then you can indicate which mark you need to, relate each of these inspections against each of these tests. So these down here, these are what we call fields, but each one of these is really a test or an inspection against that product. If you use a balloon, you can specify the mark on the drawing or whatever to indicate, which inspection matches which mark or which drawing or which bubble on that drawing. Over here, we've got, again, the sampling where you can just do fixed quantity, percent, or you can use the AQL, those sorts of things. So a bunch of stuff you can do there. Not really much more to it than that. You can also change what the caption looks like when you do it, but that's just showing off at that point. In here, there's a few things you can do. Again, these are our individual inspections. I'm going to show you how those are sort of set up in a sec. But related to that, we can set up, like on this package height, I need to inspect package height at some point. And for that, I can create, instructions. So I can have, write a book in here if I like. I can list all the instructions I need to, check that particular parameter. I can also link it to an external document that has all the details in a document on SharePoint or whatever it happens to be. The tooling that we mentioned earlier, so I can indicate what tooling is required for this, and I can bring that in, and I can add whatever tooling I need for that specific inspection. And over here, these template attachments, again, I can drag and drop in. So if I've got an SOP or any sort of thing I need to indicate how we execute this test, I can drag and drop those documents in, or use the standard Business Central and just do upload files or whatever it is to get those documents in here. And these template documents will be available when I actually create the test. Because again, what we're looking at here is really the definition of the entry form that I'm creating. So let's talk about those fields. So these fields down here, each one of these is an inspection. And this tells me on this one here, I'm allowed to enter between 10 and 200. If I try and enter 5, it's going to yell at me and say it's not a valid number. But the actual pass criteria on this is between 15 and 30. And you'll see it's just using the standard Business Central formats here for filtering. So anything that you typically do in Business Central, so instead of having a load limit and a high limit, we've just got one field here that says anything between 15 and 30 is a pass. And down here, I'm using a different filter. I'm saying if it starts with a U, it's a pass. So it gives you a ton of flexibility. Pretty much any filter you want to use in Business Central, well, not just filter, but any sort of operator you want to use. It's typically used in filters in Business Central. You can use here to determine what indicates a pass or a fail. So in this case, I'm just doing pass fail. If I had grades, I would see grades down here, and I can have different tolerances, different pass criteria for each grade. But up here, these are my basics. This is what indicates a passing value for this specific inspection. And over here, this description, this just allows you to write in something that's a little prettier for people to see. You might want to write a whole bunch of detail in here about what indicates a pass and those sorts of things. Okay, so that's the basics. And these values here, this is a decimal value. You'll notice down here, we've got a lookup value. You can create, decimal values, text values, lookup values, reference other tables within Business Central, all of those sorts of things. So if I did want to maybe bring in, a vendor, ID number or something from the vendor off the packing slip or something like that, and I wanted to add that in, I can just say add a field to this template. And I can add a new field. I can choose an existing field. So if I've got other inspections out there that already have, for example, a color field that I want to use, I could just grab that and add that color field to this. So these fields, another way again of looking at them, is they're really individual tests, right? I'm testing the package height, I'm testing the length. In this case, I'd add a test for color. So I can do existing fields. This detect fields from a picture, that's where I can go in and upload an existing, scanned in paper document uh, that I'm using for quality inspections now, and it'll try and read the fields out of there and automatically create them for me. Determine fields with artificial intelligence. What that allows me to do is, specify an item number, maybe give it a little bit of detail about, what normally needs to be inspected, and it'll come up with fields it thinks are useful for that inspection for me, right? So if I specified a bicycle here and said, it's an outbound shipping checklist, AI is going to go, okay, these are the things you should be checking if you're shipping a bicycle, right? And it'll give me that list of fields. Right. I'm just going to go through a new field here, just real quick, just to show you what's there. So the different options or field types you can have a choice from a list. So that's a drop-down list, just text that you enter, calculated value, a date, and this advanced configuration allows you to do a lot more. You can come in and you can do, again, lookups from other tables. So if you have a lookup list, like I had that packaging visual where I said it was, undamaged or damaged or whatever, well, that could be a list of reason codes or something from another table within Business Central. You could set all of that up in here. So you can add really whatever inspections you like. Now, the sample summary, what this is used for is if we're doing sampling, right? So if, we wouldn't really do it on this, but maybe I'm receiving 500 of these items. I only want to check the package height on, 5% of them or whatever. So what I'll do, and I'll show you this in another template here, I can go in and say, okay, well, I want you to display the average of the package height. And we are going to evaluate whether each of those samples individually passes or fails, and that will determine if the overall test passes or fails. Okay, so I'll show you the sampling stuff in a bit. What I will show you on this one, though, real quick, is, when we talked about this pass fail, this package height, I'm saying it has to be between 15 and 30. That's pretty wide range. But let's say I want a very specific, like when I receive, a specific box, it has to be exactly, 20 centimeters or 20 inches or whatever it happens to be. I don't want, this massive range. So I want that specific package size to be measured. Well, the problem is I might have 10,000 items and every one of them has a slightly different package size. How do I deal with that? I don't want to create 10,000 different templates with 10,000 different pass criteria. What we do in a case like that is we use a formula. So I'm going to open this up, and this is my formula. Now it's going to take you a second to read it real quick, but what I'm doing here is I'm saying, okay, I'm grabbing the gross weight field from the item card. So that sort of format there says, go to the item card, grab the gross weight field, and take 5% off it. And then we've got our two dots. That's the Business Central, formatting or nomenclature there for filtering. And I'm grabbing the gross weight field again, and I'm adding 5% to it. So what this is going to do is it's going to take that field from the item card, and it's basically going to be plus or minus 5% of that field on the item card. And you can go in and you can grab really any field you want from the item card, any item attribute. So if you capture your, those parameters as item attributes, I can grab the item attributes. I can also grab anything off the routing. So if this is a production test against production activities, I can grab, any value from the routing. Maybe it's runtime. Maybe I want to do a check to see if we exceeded runtime. I don't know. That's probably wouldn't do that, but I could, right? Because I can grab any field I want off the routing. Customer, like if it's an outbound checklist or an NCR or something like that, maybe I want to grab customer details. I can grab vendor details, bill of material, blah, blah, blah. And then, for anybody that's using the quality measures on the routings today, just for informational purposes, you can also set your min and maxes on the routing at that quality measures, and we'll use the min and max tolerances from uh, the quality measures. Okay, and there's a bunch of formulas and things you can do there. So in here, you can add in all of that text. You can add in a whole bunch of different formulas. So there's a ton of formulas you can use, if statements, all sorts of things you can use in here to determine what that criteria is going to be for a pass or a fail. Okay, including, I should have mentioned this as well, including other fields with this inspection. So I could say, hey, if the package height was 50, then my package length should be less than 50, as an example, right? So we can have all sorts of dynamic formulas in here to control what indicates a pass or fail on this. Okay, that's a very useful capability there, right? Because what it means is I have a single template that I can apply to 10,000 items without worrying about those tolerances being changed per item. All right. Now, this is our inspection. How do we actually indicate what, what needs to be inspected using this template? For that, we use something called the test generation rules. And what this allows us to do is go in and list all the rules that say, okay, every time I do something with a specific item or vendor or whatever it happens to be, I want to create one of these tests. So I've got a couple of simple examples here. The first one here is I'm saying, hey, if I'm buying from this vendor and it happens to be a chair, you're going to create this inspection for whatever that item happens to be on that purchase order. Okay. And over here, the trigger indicates what happens. Either it's manual or automatic. So I can either create it manually or it'll be created automatically. And it's going to be created when the purchase order is received, right? And these are some of those triggers like the global. I could create it when the purchase order is released or when it's received. Okay. Now, so that's pretty basic, right? This is just taking whatever fields are available on the purchase line and letting me filter on it and indicate that we need to create a test. The one below it is basically the same. I'm just saying, hey, if we're buying from vendor 10,000, but over here, I've got an item filter. So there's a bunch of fields on the item card that don't get copied to the purchase line. Well, I can filter on those as well. Now, item number does get copied to the purchase line, but let's take an example where you have a custom field on the item card that says QA is required, right? So I don't want to do it by item category or by item number or anything else. I want to have a custom field that says, when I receive this product, QA is required. Well, I would just filter on that custom field right here. And even though that field doesn't get copied to the purchase line or anything else, I can say if I buy it from vendor 10,000 and the item table has some value that matches this filter, also create that test for me. Okay. So lots of things you can do there. And same thing with attributes. I can go and say, you know what, if we're buying from vendor 10,000 and it's, something on the item card and the color happens to be, orange, I want to do a test for it, right? So you can do all of those sorts of things. So this is what determines how we trigger those tests. And there's some, wizards here that allow you to quickly go in and create these rules for you. All right. So that's the basics of how we set this up. We've got an entry form, we set generation rules, and away we go. And I'm just going to show you one other one here real quick because it's got a few other things here. This one has the sampling turned on. So what this will allow me to do is, and I'm saying use 50% of the quantity that I'm testing is going to be my sample size, right? So if I receive 100, I'm going to have to test 50 of those. And this allows us to then, get individual samples for those 50, units, kilograms, whatever that unit of measure has to be, to evaluate it, right? So this would be individual samples that I can take, and this indicates how we display it on the main test. We have something called a sample worksheet that allows me to capture, those samples for each of those. And I think, did I want to show this one? Yeah, so this one is really on a production one. So again, this is now the production order that I can set my triggers on, right? So if it's this particular routing, I'm going to create a test for it every time, and I can set operations and all sorts of things on there as well. And just for fun, let's do bicycle checklist here, just to reiterate this. So here, this bicycle checklist, I do the inspection in a couple of different places. Normally, I also have an outbound one, but when I buy this and I'm buying it at this location, blah, 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 or if I'm shipping it, and for whatever reason I decided only when I'm shipping a DHL, um, or sorry, it's a sales return via DHL, I'm also going to do this inspection, right? And this one is always going to be manually created, right? I'm going to manually create this every single time. So it comes in, it's NCR, I need to create or whatever, I can create this. So you can have all of these different triggers to control how these tests are created. All right, that's all fine and good. How does it actually look when we do it? So I'll show you how it gets created automatically in a second, but let me just bring one up and show you what it looks like. So I'm going to bring up this bicycle checklist, and in here, that's probably a bad one because that one had, I'm going to create one manually for fun. The only reason that I said that was a bad one because it had odor on there. Well, actually, sure, let's do it. Fine, you convinced me. So on here, this is how I enter the values, right? I simply come in here, I'll come in, I'll do a lookup to choose it, or I can just type in yes or no or y or n, right? So if I type in n, it's going to be a fail, so on and so forth. So that's how we enter the data into the system. And these are all very basic. This is, yes, no's like Booleans. This one is a lookup list here where I can choose that and text. And here you'll notice that this bike weight, this is one of those formulas. So it's calculated the weight of this product, and it's telling me it needs to be between these values here. Okay. The other thing you'll see on this, so up at the top, there's a whole bunch of information about what we're actually tracking, the item number, lot number, serial number, all of those sorts of things that we're testing. And down below, this is what we're linking this inspection to. So in this particular case, when this inspection was created, it was for a sales order 1004, line number 10,000 on that sales order. And this is actually what this inspection is against. So up at the top, it tells us the item number, lot number, serial number, package number, all those sorts of things. And down here, this control information tells me exactly where that test originated. So I can also bring in, and you can customize these fields down here, configure them, not customize them. So I could bring in the customer name or whatever I want in here as well. It's just configuration. And then I can report, hey, how often do we have failures when we ship to customer A or customer B, those sorts of things. Okay. And the same thing applies when we're talking about receiving. So let's go into receiving. And actually, you know what? I'm going to do this the sort of the normal way. I'm going to go in and we're going to receive something to create a test. You could also create tests manually. I could have gone in there. There's a create test button on that template. I could have hit that, and I could have created a test for anything that's on a purchase order or production order or whatever I've got the rules set to. So in this case, I'm going to receive two more of these. I'm waiting for 100. I've received some already. I'm going to receive 2 more of them. I'm just going to come in and post the receipt and nothing else. And it's going to go in, and it's going to yell at me. I don't have item tracking. So this particular item needs item tracking. So that was a standard Business Central error message. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to assign a new, I can't because we don't have lot numbers. Let's come in here and do a lot number. We'll just make one up here. Okay, because this is a lot tracked item for receiving. So I've got my lot number. This lot number is going to be used on the test as well. So if we come in, now we receive this, we're just going to receive it. And in the setup, you can go in and you can set it up to automatically show the test that gets created when you do a specific action. Most environments, and by default, that's turned off. In most environments, you turn that off because you don't want the person doing this receiving to have this test pop up. This is something for the guys in the warehouse or the QC people to go through and run this test. But for demos, this is great because it pops up the test that was just automatically created for that item. And here we can see we've got the lot number that we received, the item number, all those sorts of things down here, the control information, so we know which vendor we received it from, the purchase order, all of that we can report on, right? So now you want to see how many failures you've had with a specific vendor or a specific product from a specific vendor. We've got that detail in the system. Okay. And here, pretty basic, right? We've got the same thing. I'll come in here and I'll enter the values, and let's do undamaged because we want this to pass. And here again, that's that formula. It's taken the weight of that product and, done a plus or minus 5%. And I'm going to enter the weight, and now it's passed, right? And at this point, we've got a couple of things here. If I come in here, it is passed, but it's still open. So we haven't had the final sign off. And you can set it up so that you can have a multi-step testing process where somebody does the test, but then you have somebody more senior or maybe the quality person. This is maybe just the person doing the receiving that's entering this data on a handheld device or in Business Central on a tablet or something like that. And then somebody from QC actually signs off on it. So they'll actually come in, and this person will not have permissions through those granular permissions I mentioned earlier to actually finish the test. The QC person is going to come in and mark that as finished. And now we're good. It's passed, it's finished. And all of that, those grading rules, this lot number is now available to put away, to sell, to do whatever. Previously, when it was in progress, we couldn't sell it or do things like that with it. Okay. All right. So that's the basics. Now, there's a few other things on here. And from that PO, by the way, I can go in and I can look at existing tests for the item and document all of those sorts of things, manually create tests. So if I don't have rules set up to create a test for this particular item, I can go in and create one, like automated rules. I can create it manually, all of those sorts of things. You can do this from production orders, purchase orders, those sorts of things. Okay. Now, another way to enter that data, I'm running out of time because I've been talking too much. I'm just briefly going to show you this. So, this is that 5S inspection. And again, these fields were created by importing a scanned document. And I'm just going to open up an existing test here. This one's already got data in it. So I'm going to create a test manually real quick. So to create a test, all I'm going to do is say, you know what, I'm going to create a test for a work center, right? And then I'm going to choose the work center I'm going to create the test for. Let's go do this guy. And I'm going to hit OK. And now I've got a quality inspection. Again, if we go to the control information for this particular work center here. Okay, so I've got this inspection I need to do, but somebody's already walked around with a piece of paper and done it. And what piece of paper did they have? So I've got this piece of paper here. They filled it in. By the way, I got this from just a website online. I think it was the CI Toolkit website, just to give attribution. But somebody's gone in and put check boxes in and X's and all that kind of stuff in and written stuff in. So I've got this document here. And instead of having to retype all of this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, let's bring that document in. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take that document. I'm just going to drag and drop it in here. And it's going to analyze it. It takes a few seconds. It's taking a little longer probably for the first time I've done it today. And it's come in and you can see it's picked out yes or no's based on the check boxes. It's picked out the text, all of that kind of stuff. And if I like these, I just choose them, or I can go in and change it if it doesn't match the text, hit OK, and I've brought it in. So that's again where you can have that paper-based quality inspections, but still have those electronic records. All right. Jumping around a little, but I'm going to go back real quick into receiving here. Now, let's say I do have a test that fails. This one passed, but I've got a whole bunch of disposition options here. I can create return orders. I can transfer it. I can do internal putaways if it passes. All of these sorts of things I can do in here manually if a test passes or fails. I can also automate all of this disposition stuff. So let's have a look at a couple quick ways we can automate that. Now there's two ways. There's Power Automate and there's workflows. I'm going to start with workflows here. So this is the standard Business Central workflows, and I've got a few here. So I've got one here. If I receive something and it fails, and we'll start with this guy here, actually. So what this is saying is we've got a trigger here in the workflow. So we've got all these quality inspection triggers, like it's created, a retest is created, a test is created, all those sorts of things. And what I'm saying is when a test is finished, and that test happens to be a bicycle checklist that failed, what am I going to do about that? Well, I'm going to do all of these things, right? All of the things in this little fact box here. First of all, I'm going to move that inventory into a holding location, a quarantine or return to vendor. And so I've set it up and I've said if it fails, I move it into this particular location and bin. It doesn't have to have a bin. And I'm not going to post it. I'm just going to create the entries, and somebody on a handheld or in Business Central can go and do the movement and post it, right? And you've got a bunch of options for how to move that. And then I'm going to block that serial number so that nobody can do anything with it after that's been created. And then I'm going to create a new quality inspection test. And that's automatically going to create an NCR or a CAR or whatever additional inspection you want to capture more detail about that particular failure. So typically this is going to create an NCR now on that, right? Like especially in production. A cursory test fails, we create an NCR to see what we need to do about it. We capture all that detail. Now we can kick off engineering change requests, processes using Power Automate, and all those sorts of things. Okay, so that's an example of workflow. Here's another one, real quick. When I create a new quality inspection test, and this actually happened when we just did it, I didn't point it out though, but when a new test is created and we're receiving this particular product, and again, any filters you like on there, what I'm going to do is I'm automatically going to move that inventory into my QC location, going to be in location and bin, and I'm going to post it immediately. So as soon as I receive that product, it automatically puts it in a place that's not visible for availability calculations and sales because it's in a different location until I finish the test and then have it automatically move back into my inventory, either using a put away or just an ad hoc movement or whatever you want to do. Okay. All right. So that's a little bit on the workflows. Now, Power Automate is a lot more capable and a little different. Let's go in and look at that. So lot numbers. So I'll back up a sec. We got no tests on this particular lot number. This is the lot number information card. Typically, you're not creating tests on the lot information. You're creating tests on, an item that happens to have a lot number associated with it. But if I want to go in and test this specific lot number without worrying about, going to the item ledger entries or whatever, I just want to do a test against this, there's no action here to do that. We have an extended quality inspector to allow me to create tests on this. I could go back into the test template and create a test from there. But if I want to do it from this page, what do? Well, this automate button that probably most people just ignore and avoid, you notice I've got on here this create test on lot information. I did that by doing this create action based on the flow. I did that, and then I went to Power Automate, did a couple of little things, and I've got this action here. So now if I click this, what this is going to do, it's just going to log me into Power Automate first, real quick. After you've done it the first time, it's pretty quick. But what it's doing is logged into Power Automate. It's running the flow, or it's going to check the flow first of all, and it's going to say, do you want to run it? Yes, and we're done. And so what that's done, if I just hit refresh here, we now have a test. So with a few minutes worth of work, I was able to extend this page to have quality inspector capabilities exposed on it. And if we open up that test, it's pretty basic. All right, let's just open that guy up. We've just got a few things to capture, but there it is. Now, and actually, while I'm here, let's say I did that, and I want to share this test with somebody, so they can see what's going on with it. There are lots of ways you can do it, but one of them is Teams. Let me just do this to Teams real quick. So I'm going to share this to Teams, and we'll give it a sec. And the show preview, even if you don't have a Business Central license, this actually works. And this gives me a nice view of that inspection. And this is what you set up in the Quality Inspector setup to set up what fields and everything you want to show here. So you can share the results of a new inspection or whatever you like on here in Teams, without requiring a Business Central license. And it's pretty slick. Okay. All right. Let's jump into Power Automate for a couple other little things here. I just want to go through that. I've got a couple of, this is that create test on a lot of information. I won't get into it in detail, but it took like 5 minutes to create this little workflow here in Power Automate to create that button in Business Central. The other one that I wanted to talk about is this Teams notification. So this is an example where if you want to do notifications, text messages, Teams messages, whatever you like, this is a flow. It says, hey, when something has changed, and specifically when a quality inspection test has changed, we're going to go in, grab that, and we're actually going to post a message in Teams that has all the quality inspector details. Could be a text message, right? There's all of the different actions you can plug in Power Automate. Send a text message, send an email, create a document, right? Maybe this is the start of an engineering change request flow. We want to create a document in SharePoint based on a template when a test fails. So you can do those sorts of things in Power Automate. Now, the last one I want to show you, I'm just going to open this guy up. This is kind of neat too, because what this allows you to do is actually do your data entry in Teams for Quality Inspector. Okay, so what this one is saying is, hey, when we create a test, and you can put filters on it and things like that, but when we create a test, we're going to go in and we're going to post that test into Teams and allow somebody to enter the data in Teams. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to back out of this guy, and I'm just going to turn him on, so enable that flow, and then we'll go back into Business Central, and I'm actually going to create a test, right? So we're going to go in, and actually I could create another test. I won't do another one here. We're going to go in, and I'm just going to manually create one from a template. So we'll do a corrective action report just for fun. I'm going to create a corrective action report, and I'm going to do it on a existing item ledger entry for fun. And that's it. We're going to create that test, and that's done. So now if I go into Power Automate, this thing should have just run. You don't have to look at this, but it's just ran 8 seconds ago. So what does that look like in Teams? Well, let's jump into Teams. Well, look here in the channel, the Quality Inspector channel in Teams. Guess what? There's my test that got posted into Teams, and I can actually come in here and enter all of the data that I need in here, including all the drop downs and all that kind of stuff right here in Teams. And I don't need to go into Business Central or anything else. And then I just save that and finish it. If we go back into Business Central, you just have to refresh this page, and there's all the data that I just entered into Teams, right? So pretty slick. Lots of different options there for integration, notifications, Power Automate, everything else. So there's a few things that I still wanted to cover, but I've run out of time. I told you I'd get too excited about all the goodies in this thing. But let me just jump. Actually, I lie. I am going to show you one last thing. So again, personal device interface, so tablets, phones, handheld scanners. So in Warehouse Insight, if you're running that, you can expose Quality Inspector on that. So this is the tablet interface, is the NCR stuff. But yeah, tablet or phone, it runs on just fine as well. All right. Now for that, let's talk licensing. Or first, let's talk differences with BC Quality Management. So as you know, Business Central or Microsoft is coming out with their own quality management module. That is actually our module that is being licensed to Microsoft. They've stripped it down, so they don't get the full version. So you do get a pretty decent quality management module in Business Central. There are some differences. And once the final release is out, you'll be able to see what those differences are. But it is a scaled down version of Quality Inspector that will allow you to actually take what they've got and customize it to have some of the features that our Quality Inspector module has. So if you wanted to start with the free one from Microsoft and add in formulas or whatever the heck you wanted to add to it, that might be a good way to start, right? On the other hand, the way we license Quality Inspector is it's not user-based, it's per company. I think it's $200 a month. I shouldn't have said that, but It's listed on the website. So if you go to the website, you'll see the pricing listed there, but it's around that price, and there's no user limit on that at all. We can do fixed price implementation for it, so we'll train you up and show you how to use it and everything else. And that's basically it. And again, if you need the AI stuff, you have to do your own Azure AI subscription. But other than that, it's pretty low cost, no user limits. Integrates with shop floor insight, warehouse insight, phones, tablets, all of those sorts of things. Power Automate Teams. It almost doesn't make sense to use the free version and build up from that, given the pricing on Quality Inspector. So if you do have any additional questions about this, you can go to qcfordynamics.com or just our main website and go to the apps area and look for Quality Inspector. If you have additional questions, feel free to contact us on the website or talk to your partner, and hopefully they can help you out. I think I'll end there. There's a few questions we'll answer. If you haven't heard them, I'll get them to you by email. But thank you, everybody, for attending. Hopefully that was useful, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more great content, and remember to hit that bell icon to stay updated. See you in the next video.